أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So we'll continue with chapter 5. We were discussing the different types of computer frauds, and we were in the middle of this, so we discussed some of them, and we'll continue with the others today, inshallah. So the first one today we have is called data diddling, which is going in and changing the data within the system. This could be done by someone who has access and he just wants to harm the company, or somebody who's hacking and doing it. So data diddling is the actual act of diddling with the data, meaning changing the data, changing it around, or messing with it, right? Data leakage is the next one, which is unauthorized copying of information. So there are certain information that the company has which is trade, maybe considered trade secret, or maybe confidential information of individuals and so forth, that could be sold to an outside party, such as email addresses even, right? So this is, somebody makes unauthorized copies of that, then that is called data leakage. You could sell it, you could give it to the competitor, any of that, those things could be done. The third one is denial of service attacks, which is server failure due to excessive requests. So what this is if someone wants to harm a company, maybe a competitor or maybe a business that they want to harm, when there are requests from customers and there are too many requests, the server fails. If too many of us log in a particular place, for example, in a banner, when you're trying to look at the grades or we are trying to post the grades, there is a maximum capacity of the server, and if it exceeds, then the server fails. So if someone wants to harm a company, they could send a lot of requests as if they're customers, and the server of the company would fail, right? And this could be done by someone who wants to harm a particular company. So when the server is not going to work properly, the actual customers are not going to be able to get the service because the server is overloaded, right? Are you following? Does it make sense to you? Has it ever happened that you're trying to log in and it's just super slow, you're not able to log in, right? So this could be done by someone intentionally, right? Sending too many requests, login requests, and the actual user is unable to log in. The next is eavesdropping, which is unauthorized observation of voice or data transmission. The word eavesdropping means you're listening in to something or looking into something which you're not supposed to. So two people are talking and you're outside the room and you're listening. This is eavesdropping. You could do that with phone conversations. You could do that with data transmissions where two people are exchanging voice or data and you're just hacking in there and listening in. So this is called eavesdropping. Okay, now I'm going to continue the discussion, and if you have any questions, please stop me, and I will answer the question. Okay. The next one is email forgery, also known as spoofing, which is requesting sensitive information. So you could get a spoof email saying that enter your login and update such and such, etc. And you might think this is from your company or this is from a legitimate provider, and you provide that information, but you find out that this actually was taken by someone who would use it to access your account. So this is spoofing. They could ask you sensitive information as well, not just login. So somebody could ask you about bank account information or things like that, right? And you would think that you're providing it to someone who you trust, but it's actually not. It's someone who is trying to steal the information. The next one is hacking. I think everybody has some idea about hacking, which is unauthorized users accessing the network. So somebody trying to, from a remote place, hack into the system through the internet and accessing or harming the company's data. The next one is hijacking, which is gaining control of someone's computer. Now, you can give someone the control of your computer. For example, if I had a problem with my computer and I called the IT department, I can give access to my computer to them where they would be able to move my mouse, open a file, close a file, reboot from a remote location. I could give them control of my computer. If I give them the computer, the control of my computer, that is perfectly okay. But if somebody gains the control of my computer without my permission or without my knowledge, then that would be hijacking. And they could send email, for example, looking at the screen, they could go into my email, send emails, or delete files, do anything they like, right? So this is called hijacking. The last one here is identity theft, which is use of someone's identity for financial gain. And we're going to talk about this last one in more detail. Pretending to be someone else by either getting the access or physical, IDs, etc., and pretending to be that person. You could perhaps get a hold of their credit card or their ID or their bank card and pretend to be them, right? And how this is done and how you can protect yourself against this. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. This is not just important for the AIS class, but in your personal lives, this is something that is very important. So we'll come back to this in just a few minutes, inshallah. Any questions other than the last one? Are you following? Are you there? I know everybody is a little bit stressed out with the midterms and so forth, and we'll try to finish a little bit early today, inshallah. Okay. In our last class, I uh, mentioned viruses and worms that could harm the business of a particular company or a particular country, etc. And I told you that I'm going to explain to you the difference between a virus and a worm. A virus is a segment of code that attaches itself to a software, and it could replicate to other system files or systems or files. So what this virus is a particular code. It's an instruction that comes from outside, and it gives your computer instructions that you don't want to give. So it could copy files. It could send the same message multiple times. It could delete files, etc., etc. It's a virus that does harm. It's a code. It's instructions to the computer that does harm to you. The difference between both virus and worm, they do the same thing. The difference between the virus and the worm is the virus needs the help of a software. So it will come and it will get onto a software and give the instructions with the software's help, Word, Excel, etc. But the worm is a standalone program. It does not need the help of a software. It could come and do harm to your computer, do all these negative activities, and does not need the help of a software. So is the difference clear between the two? Both are instructions. One needs the help of a software, the other one does not. Is that clear? Are you following? Okay. Now we're going to focus a little bit on the identity theft. So the identity theft, the people who steal people's identity, either individual or corporate identities, could do it, number one, through shoulder surfing. What does that mean? Let's say you're standing at an ATM machine and somebody's behind you and they're looking over your shoulders to see what password you enter. Or you're entering into your computer system, right? They could look into it, your username and password, and they could do shoulder surfing, looking over your shoulders to see what information you're entering. The second one is dumpster diving, which is going to the garbage in front of somebody's house to see if there are bank statements or credit card statements or other things thrown in there, which could be used to gain access to the account. Now, this dumpster diving, right, it's gross, but people do it. To protect yourself against this, right, you should shred all important documents. So you should use a shredding machine and shred all important documents and not throw them away just whole documents. If you need to shred them, the important financial documents you should save in a file. The shoulder surfing, obviously, you need to be careful when you're entering sensitive data so that nobody else is looking at it. The third is redirecting mail. Now, this mail refers to physical postal mail, right? So the mail is coming to your house and it's left outside, and somebody could steal that or somebody could take it, right? As it's on its way. So redirecting mail, this could be the case of emails as well, right? So it could be stolen from your physical mail or your email. And the internet can be used in many ways. Some of the ways we described that, like spoofing or social uh, engineering, the things that we talked about. Using the internet, somebody could get your sensitive data, right, and steal your identity and pretend to be you, either physically or virtually in an online environment. The ways to minimize this risk is, number one, only provide personal information for good reasons to people you trust. So giving your bank account number, your credit card number, things like that should only be given to people whom you trust and using secure methods, right? So, just sending plain text messages or plain emails using a free emails server, right, like Yahoo or Google, things like that, they're not that secure, so people could get the information. Number two, check financial information regularly. So when you get your bank statement or any uh, financial type statement, you should check the details to make sure that the money that is shown as spent by you is actually money you spent and not somebody else who stole your identity and spent that money pretending to be you. Number three, periodically reviewing credit report. Now, when you have bank accounts and you have purchased a car on loan, etc., there is something called a credit report, which shows that you are making those payments on time. And if someone has pretended to be you and has taken a loan, you would see that that is added to your credit report, and you could see that this loan is something that you did not take out, that you did not take from the bank, but it's there in your name. So looking at the credit report would reveal if somebody had stolen your identity and they have borrowed money on from uh, from the bank or from somewhere, pretending to be you. Okay. Number four, maintaining careful accounting records. These are individual accounting records, and if you work for a company, the companies have a very good method of doing that. So you will learn when you work for a company how to maintain the records. But for your individual personal financial records, the bank statements, the credit card statements, all of these things that you get, you should organize them by month, by year, and you should be able to go back to them if needed, right? Maintaining them carefully. Okay, now in the next few slides, we're going to discuss, until now we have discussed the fraud. Now we're going to discuss how to decrease the likelihood of fraud and how to increase the possibility of catching the fraud. Okay, so the first slide here is ways of decreasing the likelihood of fraud. First point is identify events leading to fraud and put controls. So in every company, there are points where fraud can take place, like when you're handling the cash or when you're making payments, right? Identifying those places and putting controls on them, making sure that you have video camera, making sure the cash register is locked. These type of things are ensured. These reduce the likelihood of fraud. The second point is develop and communicate controls related to security policies. So the company should have security policies, right? What can or cannot be done. And these should be communicated to the employees, to the customers, so that everybody knows what they can or cannot do. The third point is implement human resources policy that sets standards for integrity and ethical behavior. Now, this is very important. There should be a code of conduct. The employees should know that they are supposed to act honestly, they're supposed to act ethically, and any unethical or dishonest behavior will not be tolerated. So this is made known to the employees, and everybody signs the contract knowing that they could be disciplined if they were caught. And then effectively supervising the employees. So it's not enough to just let them know that what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. Let the employees know, but you have to supervise them to make sure that they are following the procedures. Okay. Continuing with this, the next point is training employees in fraud prevention measures. So the employees who are working in sensitive places, right, where money is counted or when payments are made, the employees should be trained on how to minimize the fraud, what things to check, what things to look out for, right? The procedure should be known by the employees. The next point is require periodic rotation of duties. So the employees should be moved around from one position to the next. The cashier should be moved around to AP. The accounts payable clerk should be moved around to accounts receivable. This is done so that if somebody is doing fraud in one position, as soon as they are moved to another position, the next employee coming into that position will catch that fraud. Okay, so people know that if I'm starting to do this fraud here, eventually, very quickly, I will be caught because someone else will look at this document in a month. The next point is implement formal project development and change management controls. So projects are those that have a beginning and that have an end. You see in our university, there are several projects going on of building buildings and making enhancements. These projects, when they are being worked on, they're a little bit different than a building that is operating on a regular basis. So you should have some particular controls related to the projects so that the possibility of fraud is reduced. For example, when the building is being built, there is inventory laying there, right? And if it is not securely guarded or if it's not locked, it could be stolen at night. So there should be some formal project development and management controls which ensure that the internal controls are implemented in that project. The next is increase penalty for doing fraud. So if the employee is caught doing fraud, the punishment should be exemplary. It should be heavy so that anybody else seeing that would know that, if I do this, I will get the same punishment. I would have to pay the same penalty. So people are scared to do it. So this reduces the likelihood of fraud. Okay. I know I'm giving you a lot of information and this is recorded so you can come and revisit. But do you have any questions? This is the information is a lot, but it's not difficult to understand. Are you understanding? Are you following what I'm saying? Are you there? Okay. Okay. Very good. Now, the next slide is talking about increasing the difficulty of doing the fraud, right? So if somebody wants to do the fraud, it would make it more difficult for them to do. The first one is developing strong internal controls. So internal controls, internal controls, internal controls. Internal controls make it more difficult, right? Locking, putting cameras, putting security guards, someone reviewing the work. So this makes it more difficult for somebody to do the fraud. Now there's overlap between what we discussed, decreasing the likelihood of doing fraud and increasing the difficulty. They go in hand, okay? The next point is segregation of authorization, recording, and custody. What does this mean? Segregation of duties among people who authorize, record, and have custody. So for example, let's say money is going to be paid to the supplier when the supplier sends a bill. The bill should be authorized by someone. The recording of the payment made to the supplier should be done by someone else. And yet another person should have the actual custody of the cash. So you have three people doing one activity. If one of them wants to do fraud, it is not possible because the other two will catch him, okay, or her. So segregation of duties make it more difficult to do fraud. The next point is restricting physical and logical access. Physical access is lock and key. Logical access is username and password. So only giving those people access who are supposed to get access. Okay. The next is use properly designed documents and records. This is very important to keep track of who's doing what and when it is done and when it was started, when it was completed. If you take a receipt that you get from the supermarket, you will notice how much data it has. You will notice it has the time, it has the location, it has the name of the cashier, right? It has how much money was given to the cashier and how much change the cashier gave back to you. So if you give a 500 real bill and the cashier gives you 200 back, you will find that in the receipt. You'll also find that in the receipt that whether this payment was made with cash or card. Have you ever noticed all of these things in a receipt? Have you ever noticed these things in a receipt that you get from the supermarket? Anyone noticed it? Next time when you go to the supermarket, look at the receipt. Look at the receipt and see how much data it has, right? It gives you a lot of information, right? Which would help you track if there is any problem later. And it makes it more difficult for people to do fraud because they know everything is tracked, right? Continuing with the same, safeguard all assets including data, right? Protecting the assets including data, meaning locking the physical assets and digitally protecting the data. Requiring independent checks on performance. So the work of people should be reviewed. They should be checked, right? Independently checked by others. This would make it difficult for people to do fraud. Encrypt stored and transmitted data and programs. What is encryption? You know, when you enter the password, right? Instead of password, this shows up. This is encryption, right? So if the data that is stored is encrypted, even if somebody opens the file, they will see dot, 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 or stars or arrows or things like that without the real data, right? And this can be decrypted, right? This can be decrypted. Obviously, when you enter the star, 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 the computer is reading something else. It's not reading 5 or 6 stars, right? So it can be decrypted. You can decrypt the data to get the actual data. This makes it difficult for people to do fraud. The last point on this slide is fix known software vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities mean weaknesses or weak points where people could take unfair advantage. And this is if it is known that this software has some weakness or difficulties and so forth, and it can be hacked, it should be fixed. It should not be just left alone. Okay. All right. Now, the last 2 slides, in the same line of thought, if the fraud is done, how can you detect it very easily? First is implementing a fraud hotline, meaning if somebody sees a fraud, they can call a phone number and report the fraud without identifying themselves. So if your boss is doing it, you can report him and you don't have to say who you are. So you could call from outside, right? And you will not be identified. Okay, so this is called a hotline. This makes it easier to detect the fraud. People will report if they're not going to be harmed. Create an IT security function. So the IT security officer's job is to make sure that digital data is protected. And this is the person who's telling you there is a spoof email, don't open it. This is the person who's sending the email saying, don't share your password. This is the person sending your email saying, change your password. So there is an IT security function that is looking over the security of the digital data. Create an audit trail. An audit trail is a method of going back to the original transaction. Just like I was mentioning to you, the receipt of a supermarket, it tells you the origin of the transaction, when it was done, which location it was done, how much money was paid, how much cash was returned, who was the cashier, what was purchased. So this will give you, if anything went wrong with the transaction, this gives you a trail meaning a path to go back to what happened and when it happened so that you can detect if there was a fraud. Number four, conduct periodic external and internal audits. So external audits, we have a whole course that is required for you to take. And then we also have a course on internal audits. Doing audits help reveal any irregularities in the recording of the financial statements, right? And you all have to go through those courses and you will know more about this, inshallah. The last is install a fraud detection software. Fraud detection software's job is to flag any unusual transaction or unusual activity. So for example, uh, I have a bank account in the US, and if I use my bank card in any other country, they send me a message saying that your card was used in such and such place. If it wasn't you, please let us know. So this is the fraud detection software, is identifying any unusual activity, because I usually, when I was in the US, I would not buy things from other countries. So if I was traveling, then they would keep an eye on this. Okay, so this could be any type of transaction that is unusual. So the fraud detection software would identify and flag, right? And sometimes it would stop the transaction unless it is verified. All right. uh, the last slide is how to reduce loss if you suffered uh, fraud. If the fraud was done, how can you reduce the loss? The first point is develop disaster recovery and business continuity plan. So if the company was harmed, either it's through a natural disaster or through a fraud, then there should be a plan on how to recover, how to continue the business. And this can be done by having the same activities possible in multiple locations. So if one location suffers some loss, you can move the employees to the other location and you can continue the business activities. The next point is store backup in a secure off-site location. So uh, storing the data, backing up the data not only in the place of business, but in some other location. If the system was hacked, or if there was a fire because of which the server burned down, or some activity that caused the loss, there is backup data in a uh, different location, off-site location, and this helps the company continue the business because the data is backed up. The last point is use software to monitor system activity and recover from fraud. Now, there is a software that could tell you how much of the system is used, and there is you could go into your own laptop and it will tell you how much of Microsoft Word was used, how much of a particular email program was used, how much energy it took, how many hours you spend, etc., etc. The server also in a company gives the entire usage data, how many people are logged into Blackboard, how many people are logged into the email system, and this keeps a control on things. The IT professionals are watching at this to make sure that no unusual activity is going on. Okay, they have an idea that how many people are usually on each platform, and they could identify if there is something unusual going on. All right, so this brings us to the end of chapter 5. It's a lot of information. Chapter 5 has a lot of information, and because the mindset that you're in, because of the midterm exams and so forth, many students are unable to attend, and those who are attending also may not be paying 100% attention, because the chapter 5 exam, which is after the spring break, is not the first thing in your mind right now. You might have an exam today, but the lectures are recorded, so you can go back to them. And I'm not going to keep you the whole time. I will make the lecture shorter, inshallah, during this period, and we will regain and restart again from the middle of next week, maybe, inshallah. Okay, do you have any questions for me? Do the midterms end this week, or do you have midterms next week? Yeah, midterms next week, but most of it would be over this week, right? Last week and this week most heavy, yeah? Or do you have a lot of midterms next week? Okay, so don't see as is ending today. Only one. Right, so next week is lighter, inshallah. And then we also have the following week, after which we have the spring break. So, inshallah, keep your heads up. It will soon become easy for you, inshallah. All right. Noor says, when you will you be posting the grades soon, inshallah? I will post the grades soon, and I will let you know if I can have an office hour with you, inshallah, so that you can, if you want to come and you can see your paper, inshallah. Okay. All right. I will see you in this session on Sunday, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.